All right, so if you ever heard that if you, like, laid out all your blood vessels end to end,
Mm.
they'd stretch around the Earth twice?
Oh, yeah. I've definitely heard that one.
It's like one of those whoa facts,
Yeah. It really makes you think about just how much is going on inside us.
Right, and today we're actually going to take a deep dive into that.
Oh, cool.
You shared some really cool stuff about where this whole claim comes from
Mm-hmm.
and how true it actually is.
Yeah.
Like, what's the real story behind it?
Yeah.
And it turns out it's more complicated than you might think.
It really is, yeah. And it's really interesting to see how the authors of the article you sent me actually went about trying to figure out where this number came from.
Yeah, so they talk about how they actually use this fact themselves in their work,
Right.
like in their book and an app and even some of their videos.
Yeah, they're really invested in, making sure that the information they're putting out there is accurate.
Of course.
So it's really, they really wanted to get to the bottom of this.
So this idea of, these super long blood vessels,
Yeah.
it's everywhere, right? Like they talk about how you see it in books and blogs,
Yeah, you see it all over the place.
educational websites,
Yeah.
even scientific papers sometimes,
Uh-huh. And it's always that same number, too, right around 100,000 kilometers.
or 60,000 miles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like a really specific number. So you think like, okay, that must be true.
Right. It must be based on something solid.
Yeah. And then they try to find the original source.
Uh-huh.
And that's when things get interesting.
That's where things get really interesting.
Because they can't find it.
They can't find it anywhere. And this is like, a pretty basic biological fact, you would think.
You'd think so.
Yeah, so like they go through all these different websites, they check blogs and books and articles, and like nobody cites the original source.
Yeah, they said a lot of them don't even have any sources at all.
Right. They
Yeah.
just state it as fact. Like everybody already knows this.
Yeah, which is kind of scary when you think about it.
It is. It really makes you think about how much information we just take for granted.
Right, and it's not even always clear what they're measuring. Like sometimes it's just the capillaries.
Right. Sometimes it's just the capillaries. Sometimes it's all the blood vessels. Veins, arteries, everything.
Yeah, so it's like not even consistent on what it's counting.
Exactly. And that really bothered them, because they had used this fact themselves and they were like, well, we need to figure this out.
Yeah, so they went on this like fact-finding mission. Like, where did they even begin?
Well, they started with just, basic Google searches, just like anybody would. But that didn't really get them anywhere.
Of course.
Just led them back to the same uncited claims.
Round and round.
Yeah. So they decided to try something a little more specialized. They went to PubMed. Have you ever used that?
Yeah, I've heard of. Isn't that like a database for scientific research?
Yeah, it's like a giant library of medical and biological research papers. So this is where scientists go to find, the latest findings and share their own work.
So you'd think if this fact was, well established,
Mm-hmm.
it would be in there somewhere.
Right. You would absolutely expect to find something in PubMed.
Wow.
And they found nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. It was a dead end.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was kind of a big red flag for them. They were like, okay, maybe this isn't as solid as we thought.
So what do they do next?
So they kept digging, and they actually did find some scientific papers that mentioned the 100,000 kilometer figure.
Oh, okay.
But here's the thing. None of them cited the original source.
It's like a game of telephone.
Exactly. It was just kind of taken as a given, like, oh, everybody knows this.
Like it's common knowledge?
Yeah, like it's just common knowledge. You don't even need to cite it.
So they were getting a little frustrated at this point.
Oh, yeah. They were starting to lose hope.
So what did they try next?
Well, they thought maybe the original source was just really old.
Okay.
So they started looking back in time, like going through older textbooks and articles.
Like way back.
Yeah, and that's when they stumbled upon a couple of interesting leads.
Oh?
One of them was a book called Vital Circuits by a scientist named Stephen Vogel.
Okay.
And the other one was Looking at the Body by David Suzuki. Do you know him?
Oh, yeah, the science guy.
Yeah, exactly, that David Suzuki.
Okay.
And so these books were from the 90s and the 80s.
Gotcha.
And they both mentioned similar figures, like Suzuki's book said 96,000 kilometers, which is basically the same thing.
It's basically the same, yeah.
But still no source.
Still no source.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were like, okay, well, maybe David Suzuki remembers where he got that number from.
Right. He's been around a while.
He has. But the problem was he didn't have a public email address.
Oh, so what do they do? Send a carrier pigeon?
They actually wrote him a letter.
No way.
Yeah, they sent him a physical letter explaining their whole quest and everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they were really dedicated to finding this source.
And then did he write back?
He did. A few weeks later, they got a response from his office. But unfortunately, he didn't remember where he got the number from.
Oh, it's too bad.
Yeah, his book was over 30 years old at that point, so it's understandable.
Yeah, those files are probably long gone.
Yeah, probably in a dusty archive somewhere.
So back to square one.
Well, not quite. They still had Vogel's book.
Right.
And while that book didn't cite the source directly, it did have a long list of references in the back.
Okay, so maybe the answer was hidden in there somewhere.
That was their hope. But it was a long list, over 90 references.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they were kind of overwhelmed. They're like, do we really want to go through all of these?
You take forever.
It would be a huge undertaking, but they had come this far, so they decided to keep going.
Wow, they were determined.
They were, and here's where the story gets really crazy.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
So they start going through the references one by one,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, they decide to start at the end of the list and work their way backwards.
Oh?
And guess what? The very first reference they check,
What?
it's the one. They found it.
Get out of here.
I know, it's crazy, right?
What are the odds?
I know, it's like a needle in a haystack.
So what was it?
It was a Scientific American article from 1959 called The Microcirculation of the Blood.
Wow, so this mystery is finally solved.
Well, almost the article itself didn't actually contain the original calculation.
Oh, come on.
It cited its source.
Okay.
And that source was a book from 1922.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
The book was called The Anatomy and Physiology of Capillaries.
Catchy title.
Yeah, and the author was August Crow, a Nobel Prize-winning scientist.
A Nobel Prize winner. So this guy must have known what he was talking about.
Right, you would think so. And his book was basically a collection of lectures that he had given about his research on capillaries.
Oh, cool.
And in one of these lectures, he makes this estimation. He says, supposing a man's muscles to weigh 50 kilograms and his capillaries to number 2,000 per square minor, the total length of all these tubes put together must be something like 100,000 kilometers or 2.5 times around the globe, and their total surface, 6,300 square meters.
So that's it. That's the origin story.
That's where it all started.
Wow. So it wasn't just some random made-up number.
No, it was based on an actual calculation.
An estimation, at least.
Yeah, but based on real scientific observation at the time.
Okay, so mystery solved, case closed.
Well, not so fast. Remember, this was over 100 years ago.
Right. Science has come a long way.
Exactly. And when they looked closer at Crow's calculations, they realized that he had made some assumptions that we now know are not entirely accurate.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, he based his calculations on an idealized bodybuilder human,
Okay.
someone with a lot more muscle mass than the average person.
So that would skew the results.
Exactly. Plus, his assumptions about the density of capillaries were a bit off.
So basically his number was a little bit high,
A little bit, yeah.
but still impressive for the time.
Oh, absolutely. He was a pioneer in his field.
So it's not like he was intentionally trying to mislead anyone.
No, not at all. It's just that science is always evolving.
Right. Our understanding changes over time.
Yeah. And that's actually the really interesting part of this whole story.
What do you mean?
Well, these authors were off on their historical quest trying to track down this number.
Mm-hmm.
Modern science was already updating it.
Oh, wow. Talk about a coincidence.
I know, it's crazy, right?
So what's the new number?
Well, based on more recent research using more advanced techniques, the estimated length of capillaries in an average human is somewhere between 9,000 and 19,000 kilometers.
Okay. So still pretty long,
Oh, yeah. Thousands of kilometers.
but not enough to wrap around the Earth twice.
No, not quite.
So why do you think that old number is still so popular?
Well, I think there are a few reasons.
Okay.
First of all, it's a really big, impressive sounding number.
It is.
Like, it's just more memorable to say that your blood vessels could wrap around the Earth twice.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Right, and people love a good story.
Plus, it's been repeated so many times.
Exactly. It's become, like, common knowledge.
And who has time to fact-check everything they read?
Nobody, it's just not practical.
Especially something that seems so harmless, like a fun fact.
Right, and I think that's the big takeaway from this whole thing.
What's that?
Even things that we think we know for sure might not actually be true.
Yeah, and it's always good to be a little bit skeptical,
Absolutely. Don't just believe everything you hear.
even if it comes from a Nobel Prize winner.
Even then.
So to sum up this whole deep dive,
Uh-huh.
the original claim that our blood vessels could stretch around the Earth twice came from a scientist named August Crow back in 1922.
Right.
But his calculations were based on some outdated assumptions.
And the real number is probably closer to 9,000 to 19,000 kilometers.
Still pretty impressive,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
but not quite as mind-blowing.
No, but I think the story itself is pretty mind-blowing.
It isn't.
The fact that these authors went through all this trouble to track down the truth.
Yeah, it shows you how much they care about accuracy.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder for all of us to be more critical of the information we encounter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So next time you hear a fun fact, don't just take it at face value.
Right. Do a little digging.
You never know what you might find.
You might uncover a whole hidden history.
And who knows, you might even end up writing a letter to a Nobel Prize winner.
You never know it could happen.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
Me too, and I hope you did too, listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And remember, be curious, be skeptical, and keep learning.
Absolutely, those are words to live by.
Until next time.
See you then. Bye.